So I mean, I've been a guitar kid like since I'm 8 years old. So always played, always tinkered with guitars. And then I had a period of time where I wasn't doing that professionally. Like I handled finance and retirement plans and things like that. Wore a tie, and then I did the P Rails pickup. That made me start talking to Seymour Duncan about licensing it, and then I went to them and worked for them as their product development guy for a long time, and then left them to develop the Fluence technology with Fishman, and to go be with them. And so I've been on that R&D team with those guys ever since. And so I have all the base knowledge that it takes to be a guitar tech. I just never pursued it. It wasn't something that I was trying to do. So I didn't come up from being a tech, in smaller bands. The previous tech for Deftones and for Steve Stevens with Billy Idol, he would need me to sub sometimes, and you know what that's like.
Yep.
And so I went and subbed, and in our field, it can get weird because a lot of times if you bring a sub in, sometimes it's real cutthroat. Sometimes the sub comes in and really wants to take your job and do it. And I had other things. Like I'm a guitar maker. I do R&D with other companies. I do some consulting stints where I do guitar design and CAD drawings and CNC programming, things like that. And so I knew, if my friend, he goes, if he had me substitute, he knew I would just get in, do a good job, and get out, So he brought me in, but as a sub, so that I would just, like I said, do a good job. Because you could also bring in like a kid who isn't very skilled and know that hopefully they'll do a good job, but then your artist will be like, oh, thank goodness you're back, and so what was maybe funny or maybe ironic about it is that yes, after a certain point in time, I ended up becoming Steve's tech, but that was due to other very normal circumstances. There was no I didn't take the job. We were in a post-COVID world, and it was trying to figure out who was going to tour with who and how we were going to, is this guy going to mask up, and does this venue require vaccines? Can you get into Canada? Was a lot of that stuff. And so that's when the sort of musical chairs happened, and I became Steve's tech, and so I've been Steve's tech ever since. But otherwise I would sub for Deftones and other bands here and there. It just wasn't something that I was looking to become my I wouldn't say full-time, but my main thing. It just, that's how I fell into it. It's funny, like our drum tech is a three brothers group. Our other guitar tech is also like three brothers, and they seem to they all went into this field and got each other into the field, and sometimes trade with each other and do a little bit of musical chairs themselves, even within the sibling group. And so there are people who do start off, in their 20s, and they're always in a van and then a bus and then a private jet or whatever, but they kind of just always are techs, or they wanted to become that. They want to become guitar repair people, and then they just keep going and transfer that over to guitar teching. But yeah, it was much later in life, that I decided to do this. And coming in at the level of Billy Idol is great because, if it was really much smaller, I probably wouldn't have wanted to do it. If it was much bigger, maybe I also wouldn't have wanted to do it. Like there's some guys that are on retainer with Metallica or for U2, and that's a lot of commitment. I have a family, and that plays into it too, because I wouldn't have, by the time I decided to travel and be a tech like this, our youngest was already then maybe 10 years old. So my wife and I have been together for 30 years, over 30 years. And so my home life is stable. It was like when we decided that I could do this, my home life was okay to where we could withstand, Dad being gone for a while. And so I know that can be stress on some couples, that the person becomes a guitar tech or traveling whatever lighting person, and they're on the road a lot, and that can can sometimes be a stress point. For us, we're okay. You know, my wife and I know each other very well, so we're good. I wish I were home more. I wish I was with the kids more, but this, you know, it works. And that's to get back to with Billy Idol. He's not on the road 11 months out of the year. He tours, you know, quite a bit, but it's not his whole life. And so, being a tech on the Billy Idol crew, you're home a lot, and that's why it works for me. So I played guitar when I was 8, like I said, right? By the time I'm 12 years old, I'm already taking them all apart and doing fretwork and refretting, and I was super interested in it. So the local guitar maker, you know, Rick Kremer, was just as much of a Eddie Van Halen to me as Eddie Van Halen would have been to a guitar player, right? So I was into it for the playing. I played a lot. I mean, I was very obsessed with playing and learning how to do different things. And my own guitar rigs have always been really complicated and had a lot of sounds and a lot of different preamps and a lot of tone blending. So I was way deep into that side of it, even to where, like, you know, I didn't have one favorite guitar player that I only tried to emulate. I had guitar rigs where I could be like, oh, I can get any sound. I can sound like a country artist. I can sound like a blues guy. Here's my metal tones, and, you know, have all that stuff at my fingertips. And so that's kind of how my brain worked. So when it came into, you know, taking the guitars apart, putting them back together, building, I was building guitars in my teens, you know, high school, just out of high school. So I was already building. And then got out of it for a while, like I said. So when I got back in with Seymour Duncan, again, I'm still building guitars, but not as a brand. And now I make guitars, you know, custom guitars. When I'm back in town, I can take it, you know, so a lot of my clients, you know, they know that if I'm on the road for 2 or 3 months, there's not going to be any updates. I'm out, and then when I come back, I'm able to make some progress, hopefully, on their guitars. And that started because when I left Seymour Duncan to do the Fluence technology with Fishman, I also had my own little tech for an acoustic guitar, which I now have a patent on, and we'll see, maybe somebody will license it and it'll become something that's on more instruments. But I needed an outlet and a vehicle to make those happen. So I was building guitars specifically to showcase some of that technology, some of those design concepts that are contained within the patent, where I sort of manipulate the string tension so that instead of the torque just being something you have to fight, usually I'm using the string tension to counteract the torque and then create something positive. So it's not a perpetual motion machine, but it's a way to take the weight of the string and cause it to do something that's advantageous instead of something you just have to deal with, right?
Sure.
So so that's the building part. I've always done it. I've just always, you know, had my head buried in books and videos as well on the subject. There's not a lot to consume pre-YouTube. So it's me looking at Stuart Donald catalogs and just talking to everybody, you know, that I could. Even, you know, 13-year-old me going like, what do you do with the sandpaper? You know, like how leveling frets and things like that. But yeah, so there's a lot of things I can't do well. You know, I can't dunk a basketball or, you know, but this I went all in. You know. Personally, the only mentorship would just be like, as I said before, like going into a shop. So I didn't come up as an apprentice underneath anybody else. I've had several people work with me where I've taught them, and it still is a bit of a self-learning process in that I can tell you how to sand something 100 different ways, and then you get in there and you realize, you know, oh, I got it, man, I have to put a little more pressure on it, you know, when I do this, or else this part that I'm trying to make round has like a little bit of a bump on it over here and there's too much sanded over there. And so I can give tips and tricks, but I don't know if I would, you know, the thoughts always come up, you know, like, what if someone said, hey, here's a bunch of money, I want you to start a luthier school, you know, could I create curriculum? Probably. I could probably teach people on a mass scale, but more often than not, yeah, it's that one-on-one. And then you can tell the person, this is why I do this, you know. and they can, because they'll say like, can't you just use this sander, or can't you just use this? And I'll say, yes, but I use a file because a file is perfect. It doesn't lie, and you'll know, and it'll just catch a little bit if something isn't right. And if you just do sandpaper, all you feel is just, scuffing, and so it doesn't correct for this or that or the other thing. And, look at it in the light, get the shadows in the reflections, and see, you're not done until everything is, clean. You don't cascade through the light and you see, lump,
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I didn't have that. Like, my father wasn't a, guitar maker or a woodworker particularly. And so, I would say self-taught, but happy to mentor others. You hear stories of people, gear failures and this and that, and I haven't had that many emergencies in the beginning. Especially, we take pretty good care of our equipment, so when we're out there, it's we don't really have a bunch of failure points because someone kept kicking this and pulling real hard on a cable or something. Things do wear out. So a couple of years in, that's when we started having some tube failures, but we have a lot of redundancy. So even though that meant that I had to run out and do something, what I was doing was unplugging from the head that we didn't like and plugging everything to the head that we did. And there have been times when some of that stuff's been caught on video, and it may seem like an eternity at the time, and you look at it on tape and it's a minute and 30 seconds or something. You've made the switch before the song is even over, and they were halfway through the song. So if you have a good redundancy, if you have a good rig, and you have all of your signal paths, you can usually come in with a hack and get through a show. If not, just flat out replacing something that is broken. Hey, that's broken. Here's the other one, right? So by now we have a lot of backup, like attenuators that we travel with, load boxes, I should say, because those are getting pummeled. Those are getting hit pretty hard. We keep a fan in there that blows on them so that the little resistors that are in there don't get cooked. And because even though they have a high wattage rating, it's still something that if you really do pummel this thing with a bunch of amplitude, a bunch of current for an entire set, they can get hot. And probably the worst thing that for me, like on this tour we have Joan Jett opening, who's amazing, and we clear everything off for her. We don't just, like a lot of times with the typical opening act, you go, yeah, there, set up around us. You can set up in this little middle section. I'm not moving my stuff. For Joan, we pull everything, basically off the stage and let her take the whole stage. And they put on a great show. But it means we have a short changeover time where I have to do a lot of connections. You've seen the rig. I think I counted at the front of the stage, when I go and bring everything down and put it back down, I have 21 connections that I have to make. And this is all in the span of like 20 minutes. Everything's got to get moved. So it's a rush. So we had a different experience. We were in Monaco, and there was a private show for like Prince Albert, and they had some other programming. So we were on a stage that pulled out. It was on a chain, right, where they drag it out. So everything's set up, but once they pull it out, you still have to go in and connect everything. And I had the strangest, like almost like Atari sounding noise, and we may have figured out what it was afterwards, but this was unfixable, and this was a program that had to go off. We had 15 minutes to change over and play, just go. So it was brutal. And so I'm over there pulling this out, changing this out. I ended up reconfiguring in such a way that the issue was lowered and lessened, and we could get through the show. And it wasn't egregious. You could still tell that there was something wrong about it that I didn't like. But yeah, I had to pull certain equipment, put stuff back in the Friedman heads, the effects loop of the Friedman, rather than occupying the effects loop of the other guy. And so I've had some of those moments. The gear failure moments right before we're supposed to go on. But Other than that, nothing too huge. Well, you get to see the world, and it is, I joke a lot, but you see a lot of hotels and airports. So when you are working like this, you fly in or you take a bus in, and you don't really get as much time to spend in your surroundings that someone might think. But the beautiful part about like Billy Idol, for example, is he will play a show and take 2 days off, play another show and take one day off. We do have some, two in a rows. Like last night we played a show, we came straight here, and we have another show today. But for the most part, you do get a little bit of time in each city, or including all of Europe and all these places that I've been to in South America. So it usually is another side benefit to have to be able to spend time in those cities rather than just being shuffled 5 gigs a week, 6 gigs a week, where you really don't, it doesn't matter where you are, you just get out of the tour bus and start setting up your equipment in the new town. We don't have it like that. We get to spend some time out, and sometimes there's crew dinners, and so you're having dinner with the band and everybody and the crew, and so it's a great camp to work for. Billy Morrison has a side project, Royal Machines, where they'll go play corporate gigs or private gigs, and Steve Stevens will play in that sometimes, but sometimes even if he doesn't, I'll go and tech for that, and those will be just absolute star-studded evenings. So there's been a couple with David Lee Roth singing, and I'm sitting there seeing Steve Stevens play Van Halen songs with David Lee Roth, among other artists. There's a ton of other artists that come and do those kinds of shows. Sometimes it'll be charity shows, so you'll have a lot of people show up for that. And so I've had those fun experiences as well that are sort of tertiary to the guitar tech for one artist situation. But I haven't been the person that, like I said, I do have a family and a home life, so I haven't been the person that whenever we're off is constantly looking for another gig or another tour to go on and spend another 3 weeks with some other band, so that you have work until you go back out with Billy Idol. I haven't had to do that. I haven't chosen to do that. So I don't have a lot of those other, whatever those other experiences would have been. Everything is still adjacent to being Steve Stevens tech or being with Billy Idol. We did a show at the Hoover Dam. No one's played there ever, So we do a show on the helicopter landing pad in front of a few hundred people. But even before then, they did an acoustic bit over on the main part of the Hoover Dam that you see when you're like looking over the bridge. And you have to go through all kinds of security, and you're walking through these rounded tunnels, where you have to keep your head down. That's the stuff that you can't, like regular life can't get you there. They put us, Steve and Billy did an acoustic set on top of the Empire State Building. And when I say on top, there's the highest place that you can get as a civilian, Then there's another whole staircase up to this big rim that goes around, that's only a few feet wide, that you would walk around if you were servicing antennas up there. And we're out there, playing guitar and getting film with drone cameras, looking way down to the next level of humans that are walking around on a an outdoor observation deck that's down below it. So those kinds of things are just outrageous. The Monaco thing, right? We're having 1 or 2 days in basically a resort where people who are far wealthier than I am would choose to go, and there's a lot of those situations where we get to be in a place where you would have had to have been much wealthier to have spent 2 nights in that hotel or time in that resort. We get treated very well as far as the experiences go. South America, Europe, just a ton of fun stuff. And I say that I don't look for other side gigs, but I did get pulled into because we had one of our techs was going to do what we do, something they did called Generation Sex, which is Billy Idol with 2 of the Sex Pistols members, Jonesy and Cookie, and Tony James on bass. And he couldn't do it, so then they asked if I would do it. I said, okay, I'll do it. So now I'm in Europe with those guys. I'm watching Steve Jones and Cookie play Sex Pistols and Generation X songs with Billy Idol and Tony James, and it's super cool that the Pistols are out there again now. You know, they have a new singer, and but I'm out there just just as that thing is just starting to bud, where they're going, okay, maybe we'll go out and play some more live music, and that was fantastic. I teched for bass and guitar, and was able to have a little bit of freedom and control over how to get the sounds we were going to get. So in that case, like in our case here, Steve does everything. You know, he programs all of his own stuff, makes all of his own decisions. He's got all kinds of great equipment. So I'm at his service. When a situation like that, I put Doug Pinnick's pedal on the bass, so you have like that humongous Doug Pinnick tone on the bass in a trio, right? With Jonesy over on guitar, playing Marshall kind of sounds, but still using, like, I think we still blended two different IRs, like two notes to get to get a bigger, fuller sound out of the old Marshall recipe, and that was great. As far as openers, I mean, it's been great having Joan on this tour. We had Killing Joke on one tour, and so of course what a great bunch of guys, but super unique rig, super unique guitar. Really, anytime I can stretch my brain and go, how do you do what you're doing? Why are you getting something that's such a signature sound and so unique? So I was able to learn about their rig and, mess around with that. And that was, I mean, Killing Joke played a little bit more, before Jordy passed, but that was, a nice big tour to hang out with those guys on and see them on. And so those are some of the perks. I'm very blessed and fortunate to be in this field where I can do fun stuff, do what I like to do, and then even on top of it, there's other stuff, and even little stuff like, it's rare, but yesterday there was free massages. So you just sign up, and so sometimes venues will have that. These are the remnants of a free manicure that was offered at one of the other venues. And so you got to take advantage. You don't ask questions. Like, all right, go ahead, let's do it. Let's have a manicure. So sometimes venues have that. Or, one of them on this tour had a big swimming pool. So mid-afternoon you go swimming. Then get yourself cleaned up and go do a rock show. And I think you miss that if it's a small, van tour. Those are the kinds of things that you miss. So I'm very fortunate that when I did enter into this field, it was at that level. Steve is always improving his rig and looking at stuff. We're even considering a revamp on this rig, which is already modernized and fresh, for next year. We'll still do some things differently. And if I was with the same artist, for a period of 10 years, who never changed anything, that would probably get boring. But Steve has a ton of guitars, so it's never a dull moment. I never get tired of hearing the songs. Steve's playing is so good. I mean, it's in my ears, night after night, and I don't have to listen to, lousy playing. I mean, it's good. So I don't get sick of listening to that. And so like at Fishman, when we're designing new pickups, there's always some new thing, or there's always an artist that we're helping. There's always some new product that's going to be coming out that we're working on. And in my own, guitar business, there's always the next guitar that I'm making. And so I always have projects in the works. I always have guitars that I'm building, and as as time goes by into 2026, I will be, just making more cool things. I never really stop innovating on the guitar side of it. So whether it's something that has to do with pickups or something that has to do with hardware, like working with Apollo hardware on headless designs, headless tremolos and fine tuners and all kinds of things like that. That stuff is very, very fun for me. It's very, engaging. It is the antithesis of, having to sit in a cubicle every day and work on all of the same things. And I could probably do that life and then have my hobbies once it's 5 o'clock and I clock out. So those are the benefits of something like that, is that when you leave, you now have left work and you get to think about other things. Whereas with the stuff that we do, it's 24/7. It's constant, and so that can be a little bit taxing. But yeah, there's never a shortage of things to look forward to when you're doing this kind of stuff. Going into the future. We can spin this around or get it out of here. What time is it now?
It is 3:05.
Okay, we got it. I think Joan just not going to count you for a while. You can scan across
Sure.
these.
And these cabs are new.
Yeah, those are empty.
That's nice.
So the amps feed the load boxes, they go through the new. And then this thing, I didn't talk about it, but this is a new, it's on the other side is where you'd see what it was.
Sure.
Kick a Suite, it's a power supply. They're about $8,000. Here, it just gives you perfect power at any voltage, no matter what.
Okay.
It
It
just
doesn't matter what's going on here or where you are in the world.
right. And you could even you wouldn't really do it, but you could go. You could go like 120 volts at 50 hertz instead of 60 hertz if you wanted.
Sure, like Japan.
Yeah.
If you're, I don't know if there's any particular gear that would run better that way.
No,
but
the argument is that like if you had a Marshall style head and the inherent noise cycling,
sure.
of the British bands that used it was at 50, then you'd be at 50.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
So I don't know, at that point it seems a little nutty, but
Definitely.
Getting tickets and stuff, but I want to let you know that I'm going to be in town. If we have a chance to get together, then I'll do that. He pops up. Let me read this message. He's a Muslim. He left up from Chicago. He left Chicago back in the 80s, moved to LA, and he's been so Hollywood ever since. Son of a bitch. He tells me, please give me credentials. There's passes and wristbands for Forum Club, so I'll need one VIP in general and one wristband for the Forum Lounge, etc. Who says that you're going to get there?
for the forum?
Yes.